This is The Poet and the Poem from the Library of Congress. I'm Grace Cavalieri, and Mike Maggio is here, and he's going to tell you about himself by reading a poem.
Okay, I'm going to read a poem that is called Angels. It's the opening poem of my new book, A Brief Gazelle. Angels. In the beginning, there was love, coy as a crocus. In the beginning, angels came with heralds soft and sweet. In the beginning, angels painted portraits of angels blithe and true. In the beginning, there was springtime and bouquets of wonder swelled with joy. In the beginning, angels petaled roses and the world bloomed with bliss. In the beginning, a perfect petal tumbled beneath an angel's wing. Then came autumn, and all the flowers faded, and springtime shed its golden glow. Now you dwell in a withered garden, where fallen angels come and go. And you say to yourself, love is an elixir that will tender all wounds. And you whisper, love lingers like a resined rose. As you gaze at the petals your angels have shed, with a heart so weary of spring.
The master of the simile, Mike Maggio, is the master of the simile. Why did you choose couplets for that lyrical poem?
It is a love poem, and couplets, are typical for love poems for a very obvious reason. Two lovers and two lines in a couplet. So that's why I chose couplets for that.
Good answer. I don't think people thought of that, really. So I'm really glad I asked. Now, I want everyone to know that Mike Maggio is the greatest citizen in the Poetry Republic, and he lives in Virginia, and I just can't even enumerate all the activities. Can you remind me of some of the things you've done, some civic projects in poetry?
Okay, so every year for the past 10, 11 years perhaps, I do a 30, what I call 30 for 30. It's for National Poetry Month. I put out a call. I try to give a theme. In recent years, I've given instructions because I try to get people to focus not so much on the theme, but on the process of how to write a poem. And so I put out a call. The first 30 people that come and answer my call are chosen. So it could be the very first poem that you've written. You can be a master poet.
That's very fair.
Yeah, and I do that purposefully because I want to give everybody a chance. And so every day during April, I present a poem by a poet on whatever that theme or instruction
What
is.
was the last theme?
I don't remember.
I don't remember either, and I was in it.
Yes, I don't remember. I'm sorry.
We do so much.
I think it was something to deal with surrealism because this is the 100th anniversary of surrealism. So it must have been something like that. So that's one of the things I've done. I also, in the last year, because of the problem in Gaza, in Israel, put out a call for poems dealing with that situation and people's response to it. And so I had Palestinian poets, I had Israeli poets, I had Jewish American poets, and I had others who were responding to anti-war and et cetera. What else have I done? I did an Italian translation project with poets from Italy. I worked with 6 or 7 poets over about a 6-month period where I translated their poems and we went back and forth until we were all satisfied with the end result. And then I presented this over, I think, a period of 2 or 3 months. My website, a poem a day by each of these poets. It was a wonderful project.
And I might add, you have a full-time job, and you're a father with a family and a poet, and we'll hark on to that. Now, if you'll read us 2 poems, we'll get that other side of you.
Okay. So I'm going to read this poem um, called Un jour, which of course means one day in French. And there is a little bit of French in there. I don't know if I'll translate it unless I'm asked to. Um, but here it is, Un jour. Um, you came running, wind song sifting your hair, cool blossoms perfumed in plenty, cascading, masquerading. Un jour, your smile pirouetted. Wasn't there a brief fandango? A minuet of graceful wonder? A sudden symphony of surprise? Your breath rushed gently across the sun-drenched room. Your eyes, dark child dashing through wild geraniums, open bright. Yes, you came running, and the day burst madly with you. Can't you remember when the city went wild with springtime and poppies paraded gaily down the tree-lined boulevard? Un jour incroyable dans le jardin de pluie. Now let me tell you about my complaint. You came running. Once a child, girl, woman came rushing to the door. That night, wild strawberries garnished your hair. That is to say, there was red, and a flame of reverie swept through my mind. You came, a bouquet of roses redolent with wonder, and the doorway swelled with you on that drizzly, drowsy summer's day. As for me, under that dim, naked light, heart-struck, then as now, stood dazed in that graffiti-filled hallway. The scent of dreams, can it persist so long? Now as then, with you forever running, in that diamond, brilliant moment when at last, I knew. And you want another?
Yeah, let's hear another one. I love where you turned the corner there. Let me tell you about my complaint, how you shifted energy. We'll watch for that.
Okay, I'll read a short one since that was kind of long. So there was a little bit of surrealism in that, and this one is much more surrealistic. It's called "Was a Black Rose." Was a black rose. Can't stop bleeding over it. Pricked my finger this morning on a dream. That's when the sky started to run. Your face is a rose red splash on the horizon. Why the birds sing, why the trees greet the daybreak. The difference between a silhouette and a black rose is a slice of sun. But remember this, the jasmine-scented spring, the whirling stroll through the picture postcard park. I will always gather these under my moon-swept arm.
That is gorgeous, gorgeous. Pricked my finger on it in a dream. What I don't know if there's a market for surrealism, but I think all poetry is basically surreal. You know, Mike, before we entered this phase of our conversation, when we were off microphone, I asked you about your wife, who was born in Palestine. And I was very touched by your answer. And I wonder if you would mind, as private as it is, to share what you said to me. She was from Gaza. She was born in Gaza, I think.
Yes, she was born in Gaza, though she did grow up in Saudi Arabia. But yes, she is from Gaza. She has family in Gaza, and as everyone knows, the horrific events that occurred on October 7th and that have followed ever since have touched everyone: Israelis, Palestinians, Jewish Americans, Palestinian Americans, and my wife, who still has family there, who are trying to escape the bombing and the war. She's already lost somewhat like up to 40, maybe more relatives. Um, you know, close relatives, extended family. I mean, that is a lot of people to lose in a family within 6 or 7
How is
years.
she managed? How is she managing that?
She cries a lot. She's angry a lot. Um, she's angry, of course, at the Israelis.
I
She's
think
angry.
I think we're moving. The audio is we're having a problem with the audio. Can you move closer, Mike?
Sure. Yeah. Is that better?
Yeah.
So she is quite upset. Uh, she's upset with our government because of, we're supporting this horrific war. And she's, like I said, she tries to contact her family, and occasionally there's communication. Sometimes there's not. It's not a good situation to be in.
I don't know how she is managing. We will think of her. We will hold her close to us every time we think of this war. It is just in that you're married to someone from Palestine. I can't even imagine what your feelings are. So
No,
thank you for
so I want to
taking that
say,
time.
I want to say one other thing, and it's a horrible situation for everybody. And while my heart is with the Palestinians, it's also with the Israelis who have suffered. And my fear is that this is leading to a new phase of anti-Semitism, which I do not want it to do. We need to think of everyone.
I love
We
that.
cannot be racist. We cannot be racist. We need to solve this somehow.
Coming from the wound of the Palestinian disaster, that means a lot. That means a lot. Let us now soothe our feelings with a poem.
Soothe our feelings with a poem.
And that's Mike Maggio, who is with us today. He is, as I say, a public servant for poetry. And beyond that, he's a novelist, short story writer, and we will go into all of those things after this poem.
So, since we brought up my wife, I will read this poem, which is for her. It's called Truth Is, and it was written after we had a serious argument. I like to think this poem resolved the argument. It's called Truth Is. Truth is, I forget I love you sometimes. I forget the trees we planted in our little forest, the raindrops we gathered on those gray washed days. These days, when anger clouds your face like a frenzied storm, when selfishness seizes me, steals me to my perfect, lonesome hell. Truth is, we think we love when what we love is love itself. When we forget the you in me, the I in you, tearing through this diaphany of grief and joy, peeling away the layers like the skin of a wild onion, weeping, yearning, struggling to reach the succulent core. Truth is, I forget to love. I forget that moment, un jour, habibati, mi amore, when at last, I knew.
That is Mike Maggio. I think every married couple should have that poem to ease whatever goes on. Marriage is hard. That poem is beautiful. I want to read your biography, just a little bit of it, because I want to probe this. Not only have you been featured in many significant publications, Potomac Review, LA Weekly, Washington City Paper, Washington Independent Review, but listen to this. You have full-length novels, The Wizard and the White House, then a novella, The Appointment, a collection of short stories, Letters from Inside. Your newest collection of poetry is Let's Call It Paradise, and it won the International Book Award for Contemporary Poetry last year. A third book, A Brief Gazelle, Poems of Love and Grief, are coming out this year. And another novel, Woman in the Abbey, a Gothic tale, is going to be released 2025. Mike, I know you have a full-time job and you do all this, but let's just take one at a time. How does a poet write a novel?
They are totally different processes. When I get ideas, I know immediately, is it an idea for a poem? Is it an idea for a novel? Is it an idea for a short story? Um, Obviously, fiction is different from poetry. There's narration involved, there are characters involved, there's a story involved, there's conflict involved. Some of that may be in poetry, but it's a different way of thinking. How that comes about, I don't know, but I have been told by fiction writers that the fact I'm a poet comes out in my fiction. I think it's the way I describe things, the rhythms, because I do think in rhythms, whether it's poetry or fiction, there is rhythm there, and so that is part of writing a novel is thinking in those rhythmic ways.
Not hurt. It doesn't hurt to have lyricism in the line, even for prose. And how long does it take to write a novel?
A novel for me takes 2, 3, maybe 4 years, because I write, maybe 2 or 3 hours a day. I write every day, 5 days a week. I do take the weekends off, but I get up at 4 in the morning and that's my time. And so it does take 2, 3, or 4 years to, and I go through drafts. So, the first draft may take me 1 or 2 years, but then I'm spending the rest of the time going through drafts. And usually I go through 6, 7, or 8 drafts of a novel before I'm happy.
Well, I'm looking
Go
at the
ahead.
novels from 2014. So it seems that since 2014, you've been working on your Gothic tale.
So I have been working on the Gothic tale for, yeah, I probably would say 2016, because I was supposed to be working on something else, and then suddenly the Gothic tale came and took over me. But then again, I probably finished the Gothic tale a couple of years ago. It's taken me time to find a publisher. And now as when I found the publisher, we're going through the edits, which I
You
was
never
working.
fail. You never fail to find a publisher, though.
Uh, yeah, it takes time, but I do have a publisher for fiction. The same publisher that published The Appointment and Letters from Inside is now publishing The Woman in the Abbey, and I have a publisher for poetry, so that's
That
makes
will
things easy.
take care of your next 20 years. Okay, back to Mike Maggio as a poet, please, with 2 poems.
2 poems. Let me read this. It's a little bit long, but it's 1 page long. It's not that long. It's The Master Fitter's Apprentice. This is really one of my favorite poems of all time, because it's got so much going on in it, and there's so much description that I really like. So, The Master Fitter's Apprentice. And it's a narrative poem, too, so there's a little bit of fiction in here. My master fitter, I've seen your mannequins and pins, the way a chestnut-stained fabric gently drapes your rigid arm as you bend and crouch and kneel. Here in this enchanted room, filled with wicked possibilities, I've watched you measure and cut, envied the soft cloth passing through your firm fingers, coveted the barren form's frigid habit to welcome your tenuous touch. From this dark, bitter corner where I gaze and await your command, I followed the trace of your ring, now sparkling, now dull, a curious truce between your quiet eyes, resting briefly on my brazen shoulder, and your heavy brow waxed by days and years of wonder and woe. But for your bobbins, your buttons and lace, as wondrous as a Spanish galleon lost underwater, crammed with gold and silver, muslin and aged tapestry, I would ask, what of the smile that once graced your face? The golden threads that wove the hushed yearnings bound beyond your distant eyes. My master fitter, I will bring you bolts of cotton and silk, spools of dappled velvet and sheer black satin. I will lay rolls of organza at your feet. I will enfold the soft chiffon on your table and joyfully smooth it out for you to render the silver stitches, the restive embroidery that conceals your ruthless charm. Look, the moonlight stains your naked arm. I feel a tremble rise up for your silken skin, and I fear the wedding pleats will slowly ungather.
Mm. Would you say you're a romantic?
In some ways, I'm a romantic. This is my new book, A Brief Gazelle. It's a book of love poems and poems of grief. And so, yeah, there's a lot of romanticism here.
And tenderness, which we need so very much. And the male poets teach us that because sometimes other males in society do not. So we depend on the male poets for compassion, and they take away the judgments of the world and see the beauty and the imagery. And I thank you for all of that, Mike. Because you're a man of many facets, if you were to teach the short story, what would you say to your students? What would be the first thing you'd say? What is a short story?
A short story should first of all have conflict. We cannot live without conflict in fiction because that's what keeps us interested. But that conflict needs to be resolved, and your characters need to reflect upon themselves within the story, and they need to change.
Hmm.
Characters by the end of a story need to have some sort of revelation about themselves or about what's around them, in order for them to resolve the story, in order for you as a writer to resolve the story and make it feel whole and worth the reader's while.
That sounds easy enough
It's
to
not easy.
do. I know. When we say a short story has one thrust, what does that mean to you?
Well, that is the arc of the story. It is, you're starting off here, you're going up, and building and coming to a climax, and then coming to a denouement.
Mhm.
That's the thrust of the story.
So in a short story, you have one thrust, one thing that must be solved. But in a novel, do you have as many stories as there are characters between them, or are they
Uh,
all contributing to one big story?
well, I think they all contribute to the one big story, but they all have their own stories to tell. And those stories are somehow related to the overall theme of the novel. So in The Woman in the Abbey, my Gothic novel, there is the main story is about these people that live in this haunted abbey, but the novel is narrated by of all people by the devil, and the devil has his own story. He has his gripe. He has a major gripe with God, and that's part of the story in The Woman in the Abbey is his gripe.
Whoa, I am getting that book in 2025. I I love the idea. And so how did you inhabit the devil, Mike?
How did I what?
Inhabit that character.
Well, that was an interesting thing because I lived with him for several years. Fortunately, he did not affect me. But
Yeah.
I did. We all have these stereotypes and of the devil that come from our upbringing, and a lot of Gothic novels that deal with the devil have those stereotypes. And what I have been told by my editor is that this is not a stereotypical character. This
Mm.
guy has his own story,
Mm.
which makes him very interesting.
You made the devil complex?
I made him
A,
complex.
a,
I made
com
him come alive.
a complex devil. Just what we need today. Mike, give us give us another poem. Your many sides, your multi-dimensional, multi-bene.
Molto bene. Grazie molto. Um, so let me read this story. I mean, this is also related to my wife. It's called Amati Aisha. Amati Aisha means Aunt Aisha, and this really is my poem about my wife's aunt. Now, my wife's aunt, we when I lived in Saudi Arabia, that's where well, she passed away, but that's where she lived. When we would get together, she would read my fortune in the Turkish coffee cups. And I would read her fortune with tarot cards. I used to read tarot cards. So this story is about her and her reading the Turkish coffee cups. There is one Arabic word, haram, in this poem, which means sinful. So that's the only thing you need to know from the Arabic. So Amati Aisha. Amati Aisha lifts the tiny cup. Haram, she says, as she swirls the murky grinds. Her shrouded hair peeks from behind a thick black scarf. Amati Aisha, do you hold the secret to the ailing heart? Amati Aisha smiles. A dim glint veils her vacant eyes. She is the goddess of fortune. She is the one who bridges the darkness with the deep, blinding sun. Haram, she says, complaint scattered across her distant face. She turns over the delicate cup, sets it on the china saucer as the languid liquid guides her way. Amati Aisha waits. The room heaves in silence. Her face swells with knowledge and tears. I'm sorry, with knowledge and fear. Swiftly, she retrieves the enchanted cup, presses her thumb into the deep, dark grounds, gazes the length of the empty sky. Her face turns white, her eyes retreat to the edge of the world. I see, she begins, a long, dark road, and she tells of strange journeys, speaks of mysterious encounters, of weddings and tears and the joyous birth of sons. But we have not come to hear these things. We have come to listen to Aisha's heart, to let her speak what she cannot otherwise speak.
Mm.
Haram, she says at last, her brusque laugh breaking the magic spell. And we fill ourselves with dates, sip our Turkish coffee from hand-painted cups, whose
Mm.
sorrowful stories wait for Amati Aisha to begin again.
Mm. The enchanted cup. But we have not come to hear these things. May we have a final poem, Mike,
A
from your
fine.
beautiful collection. And what is the title of this book we're hearing right now?
So the title is A Brief Gazelle, Poems of Love and Grief.
We're getting a premiere. Are we getting a premiere?
We're getting a premiere. It is due out at any minute. It's due out. It was due out, I think, in January, but we've had production issues. The cover, by the way, is done by Antonella Manganelli, who is an Italian um, artist living here in Reston, and we've done work together before. So I'm very pleased. I don't know if you can see this, but
Oh,
she has done that.
it is fabulous. I love it. I love the colors. I love the motion. I love the abstraction. I just love what it suggests. That
And
is
this is
excellent.
not a good copy. This we had some problems with the printing, so it will look fabulous when we
Mm.
get it worked out.
We'll look for it. And now we'll hear a final poem.
Um, so let me read this one, which the title actually comes from this poem. It's called Shifting Shadows. Um, yeah, I'll just read it. Sentiments, he says, are a sign of weakness. This, as he mines my heart with the essence of a French tune. She appears like an Arabian night. He aims me toward her with a love-scarred arm as she leaps across my panorama like a brief gazelle. Sentiments, he repeats, are a sign of weakness. This, as her smile lingers like the ruins of Carthage, as he dons my blue soul as if it were his, confuses it with his shifting shadows, sweet jasmine and brass silhouettes
Mm.
boxing on the wall in a white room in Tunis.
Mm. Sweet Jasmine, the voice of Mike Maggio. This is the poet in the poem from the Library of Congress. The program is produced by Forest Woods Media Productions, post-production by Mike Turpin, MET Studios. We wish to thank the Library of Congress for making the program possible. Funding is provided by the Ravada Foundation, Sinipit Fund, and friends of the show, Natalie Canavore, Sandy Jackson Cohen, and Avi Day Shoshani. Mike Turpin's our engineer, and I'm Grace Cavalieri.